Hello, everyone. Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Tyler Robson, CEO of the Valens Company. Hello, Tyler.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. Thank you so much for making time for us today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So first off, I need to let you know. So usually with these episodes, I will post a teaser on my social media and just let my followers know who will be on the podcast. And then I ask the question. If you have any questions for them, let us know, and we'll ask during the podcast. So one person on Twitter did have a really important question, so I think we should start with that. And that is, do you ever skip arm day?
I don't. No, but I don't skip any workouts. I believe it's good for the mind and the health and body. So I try to get in the gym. I'm usually on conference calls while I'm in there. So yeah, no, definitely like getting to the gym.
Yeah, for those just listening, Tyler's a pretty fit guy, and his picture just kind of shows those arm muscles. So that was funny. I thought I would bring that up before we got started. But again, for those listening, we have Tyler Robson on. He's the CEO of the Valens Company, which is a vertically integrated cannabis company and the largest third-party extraction company in Canada. So, I'm really excited, Tyler, to have you on today because a lot of our episodes have focused on the U.S. market, right, and the current landscape here. But with Canada going fully legal in 2018 and being the first G7 nation to do so, I'm excited to talk about that landscape in Canada and especially what is going on within the Valens Company.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of focus on the U.S. right now, especially with the election coming. But again, I think people haven't really given a lot of credit to what Canada's done, being the first G7 country to make adult rec use recreational, essentially. So I think we've learned a ton and then really kind of paving the way for some of these other countries and our nations coming online. So lots to unfold for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's start there. So let's talk about, and I believe I've read you kind of bring up this term where it's Canada's moving from Cannabis 1.0 to Cannabis 2.0. So why don't you talk about what Cannabis 1.0 looked like during that, nationwide adult use that was passed, and then now the transition to 2.0.
For sure. So a lot of people don't understand what the legal framework entailed in Canada. So with the first few products, we were allowed essentially flower, pre-rolls, and then some oil derivatives, depending on the product portfolio we were allowed to offer, where 2.0 is completely different. So it's vape pens, edibles, beverages, concentrates, like the big ones in the US are shatter, wax, and then kind of a whole new line of health and wellness, which is also coming, whether it's bath bombs, soaps, really a ton of different products that are coming and that are new to the consumers in Canada in the legal framework.
So has that transition to 2.0 being more, like you said, vape pens, edibles, beverages than just solely flower? Has that transition been pretty seamless? I mean, I know here in the U.S., and you're aware of this, that we're still waiting on FDA guidelines in terms of messaging and claims when it comes to health and CBD and other cannabinoids. So has Canada faced any of those challenges or not?
Yeah, we've faced a ton of challenges, and to say it was seamless or flawless is not doing it service. There's been a ton of hurdles, a ton of challenges. Even the marketing opportunities of these new products and education is extremely tough because the lack of marketing and consumer awareness. So it's been a hiccup, but we're doing the best we can given the framework. And again, because it's so new, there's obviously supposed to be challenges and hurdles to work through, but right now it's going to be who can focus and who can be fundamentally sound when bringing new products to market. That's really going to win tomorrow in our mind.
Well, and so it sounds like the challenge is more adoption and education and understanding as opposed to the actual guidelines being in place, right? So is there a framework in place and guidelines that you adhere by, or are they still writing those those rules?
Yeah, so they put a very strict framework in place right now, which makes it extremely tough to market and bring consumers an educational system where they can actually learn about different products and what makes them different. So that's really the biggest challenge we've seen to date right now. It's just the consumer education or the platform to even educate. So you have to get creative and you have to kind of move within the legal framework, which is extremely tough.
Well, what's the Valens Company doing in terms of consumer education and putting content out there?
We're doing podcasts. There's a lot of stuff that's going on. So I think our marketing team is doing a terrific job in playing within the rules and the boundaries. Our investor relations team is doing a good job trying to get our story out there. But part of it too is word of mouth. And I think that's one thing a lot of people don't pay attention to. When you have a good quality product on the market, it sells itself. So when you've seen our growth quarter over quarter or month over month, the consistency, the value proposition we're bringing to the market is very unique. So we're growing as fast as we possibly can and trying to meet the demand. But part of it too is word of mouth, and people use platforms like YouTube, Reddit, Twitter, where again, if you have a good quality product, it really sticks and resonates with the consumer. So I think word of mouth is the biggest thing that we're utilizing right now.
For sure, yeah. And being on podcasts like this one, we definitely appreciate it, because to hear from people within the industry, especially huge companies like y'all, firsthand is very valuable to the listener. And I noticed that the Valens Company also has a podcast as well. I think it's the Extraction Podcast.
Yeah, we used to run with that one. We've actually stopped it for the time being right now, just to focus on a few other platforms. But we will bring that back in time when we see fit. But right now too, it's about getting our message out there in a little bit different way, really talking to people like yourselves and or different podcasts and platforms of social media to try to get the word out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm curious how the understanding of cannabis, specifically like, the cannabinoids and how they differ in terms of their therapeutic properties, how that understanding in Canada compares to the US, because this is really the reason why I started this podcast. Was there's so much stigma attached to the plant and so little understanding. Even if you don't want to use it or have it in your household or what have you, it's important to understand the benefits, because not only from a medicinal standpoint, but an economic standpoint, from an industrial hemp standpoint, when it comes to producing material goods that could ultimately replace industries that are obviously not working and kind of being a detriment to the overall climate of the country. So because it's fully legal in Canada since 2018, is that learning curve higher than the US, or does it still take a lot of work for people to understand these things?
So I think that's a tough one to unfold, because there's so many different ways to look at it. So yes, it's similar to the US in some aspects. Like we were really opening clinical studies, clinical trials, consumer feedback, and really an intimate process with products. But part of it too is 2 years isn't a lot of time. When you really look at big pharma or other products, they have 10, 20, 30, 50 years of data. And we're really trying to work backwards off 2 years in a legal framework. So that's one thing too a lot of people don't understand is cannabis has been around for a long time, but it hasn't been legal for a long time. So the clinical studies or the processes that are coming with it take a little bit longer to kind of unfold. So we're doing our best to learn, but we're seeing it's a little bit slower moving than what some people would effectively want, if you know what I mean.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, 2 years isn't a long time if you look at it in hindsight, but the fact that it's open for discussion because there are no federal regulations around it kind of helps kind of increase the progression of that conversation, as opposed to in the US it's again that stigma, and even just talking about it, some people get a little uneasy still. Obviously public support is growing, but
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, though. There's a few things that are really challenging about the US, and it's the lack of regulation and the lack of consistency. So when they say it's a 10 milligram edible, is it actually a 10 milligram or is it a 12 or a 15? Like, there's no standardization, there's no oxidization rates, there's no consistency in products. So every state has different rules. So depending on where you are, that's really inconsistent. That doesn't give me a lot of comfort too. Like, I've taken a few edibles and had a rough go in my time. So you really kind of look at the platform given. The US almost makes it worse. So Think of Tylenol. No matter where in the world you have a Tylenol, it's consistent. Whereas if you have a cannabis infused edible, it's not consistent. So if you're in Florida, it's very different than Colorado compared to Toronto, Canada. So we have to get to a level of standardization across the market to make everybody more comfortable. Because again, one big thing we truly believe here at the Valens Company is trust. So trust takes years to build and seconds to lose. And I think the US has a tough time understanding that, because again, no regulation from state to state and no consistency. So how do you build a level of comfort when it's all over the map?
It's such a great point. I mean, the lack of no consumer oversight has led to all these unintended consequences, like market saturation, like price decline, like snake oil. I mean, I had a guy on who, Josh Sweeter, who is the CEO of Infinite Chemical Labs, and they do a lot of the nationwide reports in terms of the efficacy of CBD products. And he was saying in one study, and I've said this before on the podcast, but it's just such an outstanding number, that 80% of the products they sourced within Amazon, CBD products, they contain no CBD.
For sure.
Which
We've seen that firsthand in the black market. And again, it's the snake oil thing, but it gives everybody a bad name because there's no regulations, there's no consistency, there's no distribution platform in a legal framework where you can get a quality product. And what we've seen too, because we've done something similar in Canada, is buy stuff just to test it. Some of it has pesticides, some it has carcinogenics, pathogens. So again, the legal framework is a benefit for everyone, and just consistency and trust, I don't think get enough attention.
What do you envision, like what world do you envision once those federal guidelines are in place in the US, like globally? How will that impact everyone?
So I think it'll be a game changer. I think CBD is going to be as common as vitamin C. But I really think you need to take that question one step further and break it down into different verticals, because the way I see cannabis is very different than tobacco or bev alcohol. You have your recreational use, and then you have your health and wellness category, and then you have your medical platform. So very different products, very different consumers, very different outcomes. So when you really look at the portfolio, I think it's going to be bigger than tobacco, alcohol. I think the runway's long and bright, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, different audiences of consumption, but then also different delivery mechanisms for each, right? I mean, obviously, where y'all play, the Valens Company is really centered within the medical side because of how dialed in you can get when it comes to extractions and oils, right?
Yeah, even taking it further than just extraction, analytical testing, product portfolio, product manufacturing, even stability. Like when you look at a product, knowing what conversion rate or how quick the product is converging from CBD to CBN, I think changes everything. Again, when you bring it at an international level, consistency, traceability, and transparency, I think it is really going to set us apart from some of our industry peers.
Mm-hmm. And there's like even little nuances within that particular example that you're talking about when it comes to the science of extraction and how dialed in you need to be. And that's even thinking about like the shelf life stability of the product, right? I mean, if it's sitting for too long and it's not sold, those compounds change, don't they?
Hugely. And that's one thing a lot of people don't pay attention to. Depending on your shelf stability and your additives, completely changes from day 30 to day 90, can be completely two different products. And you look at the conversion rate of CBN, it drastically changes in a short period of time. Part of it too is just shelf stability and storage. Like what is the temperature? What is the like UAV, UVC lighting? Like there's so many things that come into play. And yeah, there's, again, people have no idea what they're getting into with a consistent product that you can trust, where day one is the same as day 100.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's talk about like the different extraction methods that y'all implement. Is it all the above? Is it CO2? Is it ethanol? Is it hydrocarbon? Is it one? Or, I mean, how do you approach those different methods?
So I think we're completely unique to everybody else in the space because we look at the product at the end. What is your goal? What product are you trying to launch? Because there's a different method of getting there, which I believe people don't fundamentally understand. So if you're trying to make a pet food, I would recommend using ethyl alcohol. It's the most cost effective, and it's the purest way to get to a refined product. But if you're looking for a full spectrum vape pen, I wowould use subcritical CO2. It's your purest full spectrum product where you're getting all your fats, terpenes, waxes, lipids. You're getting kind of everything all encompassing. So depending on where you're going, there's a very, very different method of getting there, which again, people don't understand.
So that you mentioned that being a differentiator for Valens Company. So how do your competitors approach it differently? What are they not thinking of the end product first?
Not at all. So essentially, when you look at some of our industry peers or competitors, if that's what you want to call them, they have one type of extraction. So I believe that's a fundamental error to do it. Like I think that's fundamentally wrong. If you're trying to be fundamentally sound, you need multiple avenues to go. Because if you look at butane, for example, under the hydrocarbon system, you can make X amount of products out of that, but you can't make them out of CO2. So depending on where you're going, very different ways of getting there. And I know I don't want to come back to the whole snake oil thing. People try to get creative with their marketing and branding, but again, when you look at a certificate of analysis, you can see what extraction method they use. You can see the breakdown of what happened. You can see flavonoids, terpenes, cannabinoid content. Again, traceability and transparency kind of come out in the long run.
Well, I do want to kind of touch back on not the snake oil component, but the lack of federal regulations in the U.S. and how that's impacting other entities globally. And let's go back to the illicit market. So how much would you say you are in competition with the illicit market, and when do you expect that to change?
So we're actually seeing the shift happen under our feet right now. I think when the 2.0 category came out and we launched a few quality products as an industry, I think the appetite is there for the black market consumers to come into the legal framework. And my big thing we're struggling to right now as an industry is price. The black market is producing at a scale that's significantly cheaper. They're not paying taxes. They don't have any testing protocols. They're not paying unemployment. They're not doing anything we're doing. So in time, when that price does come closer, I think it definitely impacts the black market's top line. And again, even like a user like yourself or anybody, if you could pay a couple extra dollars and have a product that's consistent quality, that's regulated, or you know it's going to affect you, or would you save a couple bucks and go to the black market? So when better products come out and better pricing or pricing comes down a little bit, I think the black market will certainly be affected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it'll open the door to all the quality product, extract oils and flour that's out there now that farmers are just sitting on and wholesale distributors are just sitting on, right? Because they're being undercut by these other retail stores that are buying this cheaper stuff.
For sure. Yeah, that's a tough one too. And everyone talks about this influx of oversupply. There's an oversupply of an inferior product, but there's very little quality product. So when you're really looking at bringing a high-end concentrate to market, it's tough to find quality product that's pesticide-free, mold-free, all these things to spec. So that's one thing I think people need to understand too, is there's a ton of bottom grade or low end, and there's very little premium product in the market today.
Right, and the premium product that is in the market is hard to sell because no one's buying at the price that it's worth, right?
For sure, yeah. So there's a weird influx going on for supply and demand with consistent quality product right now.
Right. Well, we've hammered on obviously the lack of federal oversight in the U.S., but let's talk about on the more positive note. Are there anything that Canada or specifically the Valens Company has found as a key learning or takeaway from some of the adult use states in the U.S.?
Absolutely. I would say one of the biggest takeaways we've learned is consumer trends. What products at what price point, what flavors, and what dosages or what formulations are selling. So you can look state by state, Colorado, California, you get some really good marketing intel, and then you can technically replicate that and or tweak with what we've learned in Canada and then launch new products or new varieties. So some of the learnings we've had from the US are greatly impacting our product portfolio going forward and how we're maneuvering in Canada.
I know that recently the Valens Company released their Q3 financial results, and it seemed like it was a good quarter in this fiscal year 2020. You want to talk a little bit about that announcement?
Yeah, so I think that's a relative term. I think it was good in comparison to some of our, again, industry peers, but we're not happy with the way the quarter went. Obviously, we've had some challenges with COVID, and a lot of people don't understand, like, when you have 20 packagers in a room that goes down to 6, obviously changes your throughput. or even getting surgical stainless steel for hardware, getting aluminum cans for beverages. So there's obviously been some challenges. So yes, we are setting ourselves apart from our industry peers in Canada, but we're not anywhere where we need to be and will be in the very near future. So we're extremely excited with what we're kind of doing. And yes, we did have our sixth quarter of a positive adjusted EBITDA, unlike anyone else in the space. But we're nowhere near where we will be in 3, 6, 12 months. So we're super excited to really kind of continue to set ourselves apart from everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned how obviously it was a challenge during the pandemic when it comes to operations and other things. But did you see any impacts in terms of consumer preferences during?
Absolutely. So yeah, there's a few things. One, pre-rolls. Pre-rolls is 10 times more popular than I ever wouldn't have imagined. And then beverages seems to be taking off, so a different preferred consumption rate. And I know in Canada we have some weird rules around how many you can buy, but beverages seems to be a hit. We're getting a ton of good feedback on our beverage. We launched the 10 milligram Summit, so it has less caloric intake than alcohol, and then no hangover. So we're getting a ton of positive feedback on beverages. So yeah, the pandemic definitely opened our eyes to a few things and then accelerated some of our growth, which is again a positive.
Pre-rolls, that's interesting, right? I mean, especially given the fact that you're more specific with your potency levels and terpene profiles and all that kind of stuff when you're concentrating with the oil. So why do you think people went back to flower?
To be honest, I don't know. I really don't know. And again, it's not something we're entertaining or dabbling in right now. We're really stuck in the 2.0 category where we believe the most growth and opportunity is. I don't know if we can underestimate people's laziness just to grab a $3 or $4 or $5 pre-roll where you add it on to what else you're buying. But pre-rolls seem to be selling extremely well, and it might be a price point or again just an add-on. You go to the grocery store, you kind of see those chocolate bars on the left or right where you're checking out. I think those one-offs or add-ons are really moving in Canada right now.
Mm-hmm. What's the Valens Company's focus as you head into 2021?
I would say there's a lot to unfold at that one. We're extremely focused and fundamentals. I would say, what is our focus? It's fundamentals. What do we stand behind? What do we care about? And where do we differentiate ourselves compared to some of our industry peers? And part of it too is putting out products we stand behind. I'll never launch a product under the Valens banner that we don't believe that I would personally buy and or some of my associates. So I would say consistency and focus are the big things we're focusing on, and launching new products and new verticals. Again, bringing consumers more optionality when you're in a dispensary or private retail store. I think those are the big ones for us, kind of 2021.
Got you. And last question, where do you see the future of cannabis heading? Maybe start specifically with Canada and then internationally.
So Canada is going to be an interesting market. I think it's ripe for a ton of consolidation. I think there's too many players. And again, some people lack focus, lack capital, lack experience in the cannabis space. So I think it's ripe for consolidation. US, I think, is going to be a massive market that a lot of people are getting excited about, whether it's investors or consumers, depending on what happens with the election coming up right away here. I think you'll see some maneuvering. And then international, I think, again, the opportunity is endless. It's super exciting that we get to participate in it. I think international is going to be a little bit slower than what people want to assume. And I really believe the majority of countries will implement a medical program and some will go to recreational in time. But I think that's going to be a long, slow game. And part of it too is, again, remaining focused. If you look at some of the Canadian players that got out in front of their skis a little bit in the international markets, now have since closed those. So I think they have to be a little bit more strategic rather than just aggressive. So hopefully that answers the question.
No, it does. Yeah. And that's been evident here in the US where the state, it kind of is a three-pronged process where it starts with decriminalizing, then it moves to medicinal, then eventually, full adult use. So I could see where internationally countries would take that same approach to slow roll this thing out.
For sure. It's definitely going to be more methodical than people hope. But again, it's going in the right direction. So ton of upside to come, and we're excited to participate in it.
Awesome. Well, Tyler, is there anything else that you want to leave the audience with before we sign off here?
I don't think there's anything I want to highlight specifically. I would just tell everyone to take a closer look at Valens, because you said it before. I think we're seen as an extractor. I don't know if I necessarily agree, and I use this analogy that I have a fingernail, but I'm not a fingernail. we have extraction, but we're not an extractor. We're a one-stop shop for cannabis extraction, product testing, product manufacturing, R&D, distribution. So yeah, we're going to be a player whether some people like it or not, and we're excited to show what we can do.
Awesome. Well, do you want to plug any? I mean, I know that you're listed on the Canadian exchange, so maybe your ticker and then social media or website addresses that people can visit.
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is obviously pretty straightforward. It's thevalenscompany.com. We're on Instagram at, I believe it's the Valens Company. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn. Our Canadian stock ticker is BLNS on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And then our US listing is BLNCF on the OTC market. So I think that kind of summarizes everything.
Awesome. Well, hey, I really appreciate all the insights that you shared today and the background of the company, and we'll continue to follow y'all and see how this industry evolves. So thanks again for your time.
Absolutely appreciate you having me.
Yes, and thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.